What happens when the world's most controlled stage captures a moment no one was meant to see? That was the question left hanging in the air on the night Vogue Shanghai transformed from a temple of fashion into a witness of something far more human. A night defined not by couture or camera flashes, but by silent tears. By a man standing under the brightest lights in the industry, breaking in the quietest way possible. By Cdrama Kai, and by the name he never spoke out loud, but carried in every breath. Tan Songyun. Vogue Shanghai is designed to be untouchable. Every detail refined. Every moment choreographed. The room does not allow cracks. It celebrates perfection, not pause. And yet, on that night, perfection faltered. The venue glowed with elegance. Crystal lights reflected off polished marble. Celebrities moved through the space like living editorials, their expressions practiced, their posture flawless. Cdrama Kai arrived composed, dressed in sharp tailoring that matched the night's expectation of control. He greeted photographers with restraint, his smile subtle, his eyes steady. But something was already different. Those closest to him noticed it first. The way his gaze drifted past the cameras. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. There was tension beneath the surface, a weight he carried quietly, carefully, as though refusing to let it spill. Tan Songyun was not beside him. And absence, sometimes, speaks louder than presence. This story isn't over. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. We follow the moments and emotions of your favorite TV stars. Stay with us. Earlier that evening, whispers had begun to circulate. Tan Songyun had not been feeling well. Exhaustion had followed her for weeks, a relentless shadow behind every appearance. She was expected to attend. She always was. Reliability had become part of her identity. But tonight, something had shifted. Inside the hall, the show began. Models walked. Applause followed. Music filled the room. On the surface, Vogue Shanghai unfolded as it always had. But the cameras caught something else when they turned back to Cdrama Kai. He was no longer watching the runway. He was looking down. For a moment, it was almost imperceptible. A slow blink. A tightening of the jaw. Then the subtle tilt of his head, as if steadying himself against a thought too heavy to confront. And then it happened. A tear slipped free. There was no dramatic breakdown. No gesture to draw attention. Just one tear, then another, traced quietly down his face as he stared at the floor, shoulders perfectly still. Silent tears, the kind that do not ask to be seen, but cannot be stopped. Those who noticed froze. Because this was not part of the script. Cdrama Kai did not wipe them away immediately. He let them fall, his expression restrained, his breath controlled with the discipline of someone used to hiding pain. When he finally raised his hand, it was slow, deliberate, almost reluctant, as if acknowledging the truth would make it real. Cameras zoomed in, unsure whether to look away or capture the moment. The room remained elegant. The music continued. But something irreversible had already happened. Fashion had been interrupted by emotion. Later that night, the truth began to surface. Tan Songyun had collapsed earlier in the evening, her condition worsening after weeks of relentless work. She had been taken under medical care, away from the lights, away from the stage she never failed to show up for. Cdrama Kai knew, and that knowledge sat heavy in his chest as he stood alone at Vogue Shanghai, surrounded by beauty that suddenly felt meaningless. His tears were not for the audience. They were not for sympathy. They were not for the headlines that would follow. They were for fear. Fear of how close the world had come to losing someone it never allows to rest. Fear of how easily strength is mistaken for endless endurance. Fear of watching someone you care about pay the price for expectations they never set themselves. What made the moment unforgettable was not the tear itself, but the restraint around it. Cdrama Kai did not leave. He did not collapse. He stayed exactly where he was supposed to be, fulfilling the role demanded of him, while quietly unraveling inside. That is the kind of pain that does not shout. It lingers. When clips surfaced online, reactions were immediate and intense. Fans replayed the footage again and again, slowing it down, analyzing every movement. Many said they had never seen Su Kai cry like that. Others said they wished the cameras had looked away. Because some moments feel sacred, even when they happen in public. The next morning, Vogue Shanghai was no longer trending for fashion. It was trending for silence, for a tear, for a man who had nothing to gain by letting his guard down and everything to lose. Su Kai did not issue a statement. He did not explain himself. He did not turn pain into poetry for the internet. His silence was heavy, deliberate, and deeply respectful. And Tan Songyun remained off-screen, recovering away from the noise that had followed her collapse. In the days that followed, conversations shifted. About overwork, about the cost of perfection, about why it takes visible suffering for the industry to pause, even briefly. And at the center of those conversations was that single image. Su Kai standing alone, head lowered, tears falling silently, in a room designed for everything except vulnerability. That night did not just shake Vogue Shanghai. It exposed something fragile beneath its polished surface. A reminder that even the strongest walls cannot keep emotion out forever. That even the most disciplined hearts can break quietly. And that sometimes the most powerful moment in a room full of spectacle is the one that was never meant to be seen. Because when Su Kai cried for Tan Songyun, he did not disrupt fashion. He revealed the truth hiding behind it. And long after the lights dimmed and the runway cleared, that truth remained. Uncomfortable, unavoidable, and impossible to forget. What followed that night was not chaos, but a kind of reckoning. By morning, the city had moved on, as it always does. Traffic returned. Headlines refreshed. New stories pushed forward. But for those who witnessed Vogue Shanghai through the lens of that single quiet moment, time felt altered. As if the night had left a mark that could not be erased by daylight. Behind closed doors, conversations unfolded in whispers rather than statements. Designers, managers, assistants, and executives spoke in lowered voices about Tan Songyun's condition, about the schedule she had kept, about how easily the warning signs had been ignored. There was no scandal to deny, no rumor to spin. Just an uncomfortable awareness settling in. That the system had once again asked for too much. Su Kai remained absent from public view. No candid airport photos. No brand updates. No carefully timed posts to reassure fans. His silence was not dramatic. It was protective. Those close to him said he declined appearances without explanation, choosing instead to remain near the hospital, near the one place that mattered more than any spotlight. When asked, he offered only a brief response. She needs rest. And so do we, his eyes seemed to say. When Tan Songyun finally broke her silence, it was not through an interview or a stage return. It came quietly, through a short message that thanked fans for their concern and promised recovery. There was no mention of collapse, no description of pain, only gratitude and a gentle reminder to take care. But people noticed what was not said. They noticed the absence of her usual brightness, the way her words felt softer, more deliberate, as if something had shifted deep within her. The industry responded cautiously, almost reluctantly. A few schedules were postponed. A few appearances canceled. Statements about health and balance surfaced once again, familiar words that had appeared after many similar incidents in the past. And yet this time, something felt different. Because this time the moment had a face. Su Kai's face. That image from Vogue Shanghai continued to circulate, not because it was sensational, but because it was intimate. It was a rare interruption in a world that thrives on distance between stars and their emotions. It reminded people that care can exist even when it is inconvenient, even when it does not fit the narrative. For many fans, that night redefined how they saw him. Not as a flawless leading man, not as an untouchable celebrity, but as someone capable of quiet devotion, of fear that does not perform, of loyalty that does not announce itself. And in that shift, admiration deepened into respect. Weeks later, when Su Kai finally reappeared, it was brief and understated. He looked thinner, calmer, older, somehow. He answered questions with restraint, steering conversations away from himself, away from speculation. When Tan Songyun's name was mentioned, his expression softened for just a moment before returning to neutrality. That moment was enough, because those who had seen his tears already knew the truth. The night that shook Vogue Shanghai was never about fashion, or fame, or spectacle. It was about the cost of endurance, about the quiet bonds that form behind the scenes, about what happens when a system built on beauty collides with the reality of human limits. And perhaps the most lasting impact of that night was not the pause it forced, but the mirror it held up. A mirror showing an industry that celebrates strength but rarely protects it. An audience that consumes perfection but is startled by pain. And a man who stood in the middle of it all, choosing silence over performance. Su Kai did not speak that night. He did not need to. His tears had already said everything. And long after Vogue Shanghai returned to its usual rhythm, that image remained. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful story is not told through words, but through a single quiet moment when the heart can no longer pretend. Because that night did not just pass through Shanghai. It stayed. In memory. In reflection. And in the silent understanding that even in a world built on illusion, truth will always find a way to surface.